He was worth millions. He had 6 months to live, or so his family thought. While he lay dying in bed, his wife was cheating in the next building. His sons were selling his properties. His daughters were fighting over his money. But here's the secret. He was never sick. He was testing them, recording them, watching them. Only any person stayed loyal. And when he finally got up from that bed and revealed the truth, the look on their faces was priceless. This is the ultimate revenge story. Stay till the end, because karma has never been more satisfying. Welcome to Penthouse Stories with Grandpa. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and share your thoughts on the story, as well as where you are watching from.
You know, life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it. Today, I want to tell you about Richard Thompson, a man who had everything money could buy, but wondered if he had the one thing money couldn't buy: genuine love. Richard Thompson lived in a beautiful mansion in the suburbs of Chicago. At 72 years old, he had built an empire from nothing. He owned apartment buildings, shopping centers, a chain of restaurants, and a successful construction company. His children grew up in luxury, never knowing what it meant to struggle. They had the best schools, the finest clothes, and traveled the world. Richard gave them everything. But as Richard sat in his study one quiet evening, looking at a family photograph on his desk, a troubling question entered his mind. He stared at the faces smiling back at him, his wife Patricia, his sons Thomas and James, and his daughters Angela and Lily. "Do they love me?" he whispered to himself. "Or do they just love what I can give them?" You see, Richard had been feeling it for a while now. The distance. The way conversations always seemed to drift toward money. How his children called more often when they needed something. How his wife seemed more interested in social events than spending quiet evenings with him. It ate at him, this uncertainty. So Richard made a decision. He called his longtime attorney, Gregory Walsh, and his personal physician, Dr. Helen Brooks, to his home. They met privately in his study, away from the rest of the family. "I need your help with something unusual," Richard began, his voice serious. "I want to know who in my family truly loves me. Not my money, not my status, but me." Gregory leaned forward. "What are you proposing, Richard?" "I want to pretend I'm dying," Richard said firmly. "I want to fake a terminal illness and see how my family responds. Who will care for me? Who will stay by my side? Who will immediately start thinking about my money?" Dr. Brooks looked concerned. "Richard, that's quite extreme. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Richard replied. "I've spent my entire life building wealth for this family. I need to know if they love the man or just the money." Gregory nodded slowly. "I understand. But Richard, let me give you some advice. Before we start this, let me help you protect half of your assets. I'll set up a separate account and transfer funds there. That way, if people's true colors show and they're only after money, they won't be able to touch everything you've worked for." Richard smiled sadly. "That's wise. Do it." Dr. Brooks added, "I'll tell the family you have advanced lung cancer. I'll say you have perhaps 6 to 8 months left. I'll make it convincing." And so, the plan was set in motion. The next morning, Richard started coughing. Loudly. Dramatically. He stayed in bed, refused most of his meals, and made himself look as weak as possible. His family noticed immediately. "Dad's not looking well," Angela said to her siblings at breakfast. "We should call Dr. Brooks." Dr. Brooks arrived that afternoon. She examined Richard while the entire family gathered in his bedroom, their faces etched with concern. After what seemed like forever, she turned to face them, her expression grave. "I'm afraid I have difficult news," Dr. Brooks said softly. "Your father has advanced lung cancer. It's progressed quite far. He likely has 6 to 8 months, perhaps less." The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. Patricia, Richard's wife, gasped and grabbed the bedpost for support. Angela burst into tears. "No, Daddy, no," she cried, rushing to his bedside. Thomas and James stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. "This can't be happening," James whispered. For the first few days, everyone seemed genuinely concerned. They brought Richard soup, they sat with him, they asked how he was feeling. Patricia would come in the morning and evening. Angela read to him. The boys checked in between work calls. But then, slowly, things began to change. By the end of the first week, Patricia stopped coming to his room as often. "It's too painful," she told the housekeeper. "I can't bear to see him like this." Angela started spending more time on her phone during her visits, and her visits got shorter. Thomas began showing unusual interest in the family business. One afternoon, he walked into Richard's room with a briefcase full of papers. "Dad, you should rest and not worry about the company," Thomas said, his voice trying to sound caring but with an edge Richard recognized. "Let me take over for now. Just temporarily, of course. Until you feel better." Richard looked at his oldest son and nodded weakly, playing his part. Inside, his heart began to ache. But he needed to see this through. Thomas wasted no time. Within days, he positioned himself as the new head of Thompson Construction. He walked into board meetings like he owned the place, which, in his mind, he soon would. Meanwhile, James started spending money like water. New designer clothes appeared. Expensive dinners. A luxury sports car that cost more than most people's houses. Angela upgraded her entire wardrobe and began posting photos online with captions about living life to the fullest. And Patricia. She barely looked at Richard anymore. But there was one person whose behavior never changed. Lily, the youngest daughter, stayed by her father's side every single day. She would wake up early to prepare his breakfast, help him eat, clean his room, and sit with him for hours, sometimes just holding his hand in silence. As Richard lay there, pretending to be dying, watching his family's true nature reveal itself day by day, he realized his test was working. But the results were breaking his heart. And this was only the beginning. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where things really started to fall apart. Richard continued his act, lying in bed day after day, coughing weakly, barely eating. Lily never left his side. She would feed him slowly, spoonful by spoonful, encouraging him gently. "Come on, Dad, just a little more. You need your strength." She would read him the newspaper, play his favorite music, and tell him stories about her day, trying to keep his spirits up. At night, she would often fall asleep in the chair beside his bed, refusing to leave him alone. "Lily, sweetheart, you don't have to stay," Richard would say, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not going anywhere, Dad," she would reply, squeezing his hand. "You were always there for me. Now it's my turn to be here for you." Those words meant everything to Richard. But they also made the contrast with everyone else even more painful. Thomas had completely taken over the company, and he was making changes. Big changes. The kind of changes that made Richard's blood boil, even though he had to pretend not to notice. The first thing Thomas did was fire the senior staff. These were people who had worked with Richard for 20, 30 years. They knew the business inside and out. They were loyal, dedicated, and had helped build the company from the ground up. Mr. Peterson, who had been with Richard for 28 years, came to the mansion one evening, his eyes red. He knocked on Richard's bedroom door. "Boss," Mr. Peterson said, his voice shaking, "Thomas fired me today. He said the company needs fresh blood. After everything. I just wanted to say goodbye." Richard's heart broke, but he had to maintain his act. He reached out a trembling hand. "Thank you, Peterson. For everything." After Peterson left, Lily found her father crying silently, his face turned to the wall. Thomas replaced the experienced workers with his friends. Young guys who liked to party, who treated the business like a playground. They held expensive launch parties, went on unnecessary business trips to beach resorts, and acted like the money would never run out. The company's profits started dropping. Clients began complaining. Deals fell through. But Thomas didn't seem to care. He was too busy enjoying himself, driving around in the company's luxury vehicles and posting photos online like he was some kind of celebrity CEO. James wasn't any better. He sold one of the family's investment properties, a beautiful apartment building downtown that generated steady rental income. He did it quietly, forging Richard's signature, and pocketed the money. What did he do with it? He spent it on a woman he'd met online. Designer gifts, expensive hotels, trips to Las Vegas. He was throwing money around like it grew on trees. When Angela found out, she was furious. Not because James had betrayed their father, but because she felt entitled to that money too. "That property was supposed to be for all of us," she screamed at James one night. The whole house could hear them fighting. "I did what I had to do." James shouted back. "Thomas is wasting money at the company, and nobody's saying anything about that." "That's different. The company needs investment." Investment. His throwing parties and buying expensive cars. Their argument turned physical. They actually started pushing and shoving each other in the hallway. The security guards had to pull them apart. Lily ran downstairs, tears streaming down her face. "Stop it. Both of you, stop it. Dad is upstairs dying, and you're down here fighting over his money. Have you no shame?" They both stopped, breathing hard, but neither apologized. Upstairs, Richard heard everything. Every word. Every crash. Every hateful accusation. He lay there in the darkness, a single tear rolling down his cheek. Gregory, the attorney, visited Richard secretly one night when everyone else was asleep. "Richard," Gregory whispered, "I need to tell you something. James sold the Madison Avenue property." Richard nodded slowly. "I know. But here's the thing," Gregory continued. "I made sure my people bought it. The sale went through, but the property is still technically yours. James has the money, but you still own the building. I've kept all the documents safe." "Thank you, Gregory," Richard whispered. "You're a good friend." "There's more," Gregory said, his face troubled. "Thomas is planning to sell the flagship restaurant, the one you opened 30 years ago. The original Thompson's Steakhouse." Richard's eyes filled with tears. That restaurant was his pride and joy. It was where everything began. "Let him try," Richard said quietly. "I want to see how far they'll go." Meanwhile, Patricia was on a completely different path. She had stopped visiting Richard altogether. The housekeeper told Lily that Patricia had been going out almost every afternoon, all dressed up, wearing expensive perfume. One evening, Lily decided to follow her mother. What she discovered made her sick to her stomach. Patricia had been meeting a man named Derek, a personal trainer from her gym. He was young, probably in his early 30s, with styled hair and a smooth smile. Lily watched from her car as her mother laughed with him at a cafe, holding his hand across the table. The next day, Patricia did something unthinkable. She brought Derek to the house. "Everyone, this is Derek," Patricia announced casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "He's going to be my personal driver. I need someone to take me places, with Richard being so ill." Thomas and James exchanged glances but said nothing. Angela raised her eyebrows but shrugged. Only Lily stood up, her face pale. "Mom, we already have a driver." "Derek is my driver," Patricia said firmly. "He'll stay in the staff quarters. Is that a problem?" Lily looked at her mother with disgust and disbelief but couldn't find words. She turned and ran upstairs to her father's room. That night, Richard heard footsteps and whispers coming from outside. Low voices, giggling. He knew Patricia was sneaking out to meet Derek. He lay there in the dark, his heart not broken by illness, but by betrayal. The woman he'd spent 40 years with, the woman he'd built a life with, had already moved on. He wasn't even dead yet, and she had replaced him. Richard closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "This test is showing me everything I needed to know. But oh, how it hurts." Things were about to reach a breaking point. Let me tell you how it all came crashing down. Lily couldn't sleep. The image of her mother with Derek kept playing in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Around midnight, she got up to get some water from the kitchen. As she walked through the quiet house, she heard sounds coming from the staff quarters in the back. Soft music. Laughter. Whispers. Something drew her toward those sounds. Maybe she needed to confirm what she already suspected. Maybe she needed to see the truth with her own eyes to truly believe it. She walked quietly to the small building behind the main house. The door to Derek's room was slightly open. Light spilled out into the darkness. Lily pushed the door open wider. What she saw made her freeze. Her mother, Patricia, was sitting on Derek's lap, both of them half-dressed, drinking wine and laughing like teenagers. "Mom!" Lily screamed. Patricia jumped up so fast she nearly fell over. Derek scrambled to grab his shirt, his face red with panic. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Patricia stammered. "What am I doing here?" Lily's voice shook with rage and disgust. "What are you doing here, Mom? Dad is upstairs, lying in bed, dying, and you're here with this stranger." Derek tried to speak. "Look, I can explain." "Get out!" Lily screamed at him. "Get out of this house right now. Pack your things and leave." Derek didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his belongings and ran out the door, not even fully dressed. Patricia tried to approach her daughter. "Lily, please, you don't understand." "Understand what?" Lily's eyes blazed with tears. "That my mother is a cheater. That you've abandoned Dad. He gave you everything, Mom. Everything. And this is how you repay him. Your father doesn't even talk to me anymore." Patricia shouted back, defensive now. "He just lies there. I'm lonely, Lily. I have needs too." "He's dying." Lily screamed. "He's dying, and all you can think about is yourself. You're selfish, Mom. You're disgusting." Patricia's face hardened. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. And don't you tell anyone about this, especially not your brothers or sister." Lily wiped her tears. "I won't tell them. But I'm done with you. And I'm getting Dad out of this house. Away from all of you." The next morning, Lily made arrangements quietly. She spoke with the regular driver, packed some of her father's things, and carefully helped Richard into the car. "Where are we going, sweetheart?" Richard asked weakly, still playing his role. "Home, Dad," Lily said softly. "Your real home. Back to Riverside, where you grew up. Maybe the people there remember what love and loyalty mean." They drove for 3 hours to the small town of Riverside, to the old family property that Richard had kept all these years but rarely visited. It was a modest house compared to the mansion, but it had warmth the mansion had lost. As soon as they arrived, news spread through the town. "Richard Thompson is back. Richard is very sick." People Richard had known for decades started showing up. Old friends, distant cousins, neighbors, even people he'd helped years ago by giving them jobs or paying for their children's education. They brought food, homemade remedies, prayers, and most importantly, genuine love. "Mr. Thompson was so good to this town," one elderly woman said, tears in her eyes. "He built the community center, paid for the new school wing, helped so many families. We won't let him suffer." They pooled money together and called a local herbal healer, a respected elderly man named Samuel who was known throughout the region for his natural treatments. Samuel came to examine Richard. When everyone left the room, Samuel sat beside the bed and looked directly into Richard's eyes. "You're not as sick as they think, are you?" Samuel said quietly. Richard was startled. "What do you mean?" Samuel smiled gently. "I've been healing people for 50 years. I know real sickness when I see it. Your body is tired, yes. But not from disease. From heartbreak." Richard stared at this wise old man and then, slowly, he nodded. "You're right. I'm not sick. It was a test." "A test of love," Samuel said, understanding immediately. "Yes," Richard whispered. "To see who truly cared about me. And the answer has broken my heart." Samuel placed a warm hand on Richard's shoulder. "But you found one true heart, didn't you? Your daughter Lily. Hold on to that. One genuine love is worth more than 100 false ones." Richard nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the mansion was imploding. Thomas had discovered that James had sold the apartment building. He confronted him in the living room, and the argument got violent fast. They actually threw punches at each other, breaking a glass table and knocking over expensive vases. The company was hemorrhaging money. Clients were leaving. The bank was calling about loans. The flagship restaurant was losing money weekly because Thomas had replaced the experienced chef with someone cheap who couldn't cook. Patricia was falling apart without Derek, drinking wine alone and avoiding everyone. Angela was desperately trying to find documents to sell property herself, frustrated that she couldn't access anything without her father's signature. One evening, they all gathered for what Thomas called an emergency family meeting. Everyone except Lily, who was still with Richard in Riverside. "We need to know what's in Dad's will," Thomas announced. "We need to plan. The company needs immediate cash flow. We have to make decisions." "He's not dead yet," Angela said coldly. "You can't read a will while someone is still alive." "Then we wait until—" Thomas didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what he meant. James stood up angrily. "This is sick. We're sitting here planning like vultures." "Oh, please," Patricia snapped. "Don't act like you're better than us. You already sold property and spent the money on some girl you met online." The room erupted in accusations and shouting. Nobody noticed that Richard's attorney, Gregory, was taking notes of everything, recording some conversations, and preparing for what was coming next. In Riverside, Richard sat on the small porch of his childhood home, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset. Lily brought him tea and sat beside him. "Dad," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "It's about Mom." And then Lily told him everything. About Derek, about what she'd seen, about the betrayal. Richard listened quietly. When she finished, he took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for telling me. And thank you for caring enough to be hurt by it. That shows me your heart is true." "What are we going to do, Dad?" Richard looked at the orange sky and smiled. A different kind of smile. Not weak. Not sad. But determined. "We're going home, Lily. And it's time everyone learns the truth." Now, this is where everything comes together. This is the moment that changed everything. 3 weeks after arriving in Riverside, Richard felt it was time. He'd seen enough. He'd learned what he needed to know. And now, it was time to end the charade. One morning, Richard got out of bed without any help. He walked to the window, stretched, and smiled. Lily walked in with breakfast and stopped in her tracks. "Dad, you're standing." Richard turned to her with a gentle smile. "Lily, my dear daughter, sit down. We need to talk." Lily set the tray down, her heart pounding. "Dad, what's happening? Are you feeling better? Did Samuel's herbs work?" "There were no herbs needed," Richard said softly. "Lily, I was never sick." Lily's mouth fell open. "What?" "I don't have cancer. I never did. It was all a performance, a test. I wanted to see who in our family truly loved me, and who only loved my wealth." Lily sat down hard on the bed, trying to process this information. "You mean, all this time, the doctor, the diagnosis?" "Dr. Brooks and Gregory were helping me. It was planned from the beginning." Richard sat beside his daughter and took her hand. "And you, my precious Lily, you passed the test with flying colors. You showed me pure, unconditional love. You stayed by my side when everyone else showed their true colors." Tears streamed down Lily's face. "I can't believe this. But Dad, your heart must be so broken by what you saw." "It is," Richard admitted. "But it's also full of gratitude for you. Now, pack our things. We're going home. And I'm going to address this family once and for all." That afternoon, Richard made a phone call. "Gregory, it's time. Gather everyone at the house tomorrow afternoon. Tell them it's urgent regarding my estate. And bring all the documents we discussed." The next day, as the car pulled into the mansion's driveway, the security guard's jaw dropped. "Mr. Thompson. Sir, you're walking." Richard got out of the car, standing tall and strong, looking healthier than he had in months. "Indeed I am. Please inform the family I'm home." Inside the house, Angela was the first to see him. She was scrolling through her phone on the couch when she heard footsteps. She looked up and screamed, "Dad! Oh my God, Dad, you're walking. You're okay. You look amazing." She ran to him and hugged him tight, tears of shock streaming down her face. James came running down the stairs. "What's all the noise?" He stopped mid-sentence. Dad. But the doctor said. How is this possible? Thomas emerged from the study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. When he saw his father, the glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Patricia appeared from the dining room, and the color drained from her face. Richard. You're well. Richard stood in the center of his grand foyer, looking at each of them calmly. Hello, family. I'm home. But Dad, the cancer, Angela stammered. Dr. Brooks said. We'll discuss everything tomorrow, Richard interrupted. Gregory is coming. We're having a family meeting. Everyone be in the living room at 2 p.m. sharp. No excuses. That night, nobody in the house could sleep. They were all confused, shocked, and starting to feel a creeping sense of fear. Something was happening, and they could feel it. The next afternoon, the entire family gathered in the living room. Gregory Walsh sat in a leather chair, a thick folder in his lap. Richard stood by the fireplace, strong and commanding. I've asked you all here because there's something you need to know, Richard began. His voice was clear, powerful. This wasn't a sick man speaking. This was the Richard Thompson who had built an empire. For the past 2 months, I haven't been sick. I don't have cancer. I never did. The room exploded with gasps and confusion. What? Thomas jumped up. What are you talking about? Sit down, Richard commanded, and Thomas Saturday. It was a test. A test to see who among you truly loved me. To see who would care for me when I couldn't give any more. To see who would stay by my side versus who would start dividing up my assets before I was even dead. Patricia's face went white. James looked at the floor. Angela started crying quietly. Let me tell you what I observed, Richard continued, his voice steady but filled with pain. Thomas, you immediately took over my company. You fired loyal employees who had worked with me for decades. Good men and women who helped build that business from nothing. You replaced them with your party friends. You threw expensive events, bought luxury cars, and treated the company like your personal playground. Under your leadership, profits dropped by 40%. Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but Richard held up his hand. James, you sold the Madison Avenue property. You forged my signature and sold it, thinking I was too weak to notice. You took that money and spent it on expensive gifts for some woman you barely know, acting like it was casino money. James couldn't meet his father's eyes. Angela, you weren't as bad as your brothers, but you also started living beyond your means, buying designer everything, constantly asking your mother when we could sell this property or that asset. You were planning my estate before I was gone. Angela sobbed into her hands. Richard then turned to Patricia, and his voice became colder. And you, Patricia, my wife of 40 years. You stopped visiting me within a week. You complained about my room smelling like death. You had me moved to a guest room like I was an inconvenience. And then... Richard paused, his jaw tight. You brought another man into my house. You had an affair while I lay in bed, supposedly dying. Patricia gasped. Richard, please. Lily saw you, Richard said firmly. In the staff quarters. With Derek. The room fell completely silent. Thomas and James stared at their mother in shock and disgust. I was lonely, Patricia whispered weakly. You were selfish, Richard corrected. You all were. Except one person. He turned to Lily, who stood quietly by the window. Lily. My youngest daughter. She stayed with me every single day. She fed me, cleaned me, sang to me, prayed over me. She never complained. She never asked about money. She just loved her father. When things got bad here, she took me back to Riverside, hoping to find help for me. She never gave up. Richard walked over to Gregory. That's why I asked Gregory to prepare these documents. Gregory opened the folder. Thomas and James, the properties you sold? Gregory's people bought them. They're still mine. You have the money you took, but you've lost your inheritance. You're both fired from the company, effective immediately. Go find your own way. Both men looked like they'd been struck by lightning. Angela, you'll receive nothing from me until you prove, through actions not words, that you've changed. You're on probation. Angela nodded through her tears. Patricia, you have 24 hours to pack your belongings and leave this house. Our marriage is over. Patricia fell to her knees. Richard, please, I'm so sorry. 24 hours, Richard repeated coldly. Then he turned to Lily and smiled. Lily, everything I have left is now yours. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. You're also the new CEO of Thompson Construction, effective immediately. The room erupted. Thomas and James shouted in protest. Angela cried harder. But Richard raised his voice over them all. This is my decision, and it's final. Gregory has all the legal documents. Lily earned this through love, loyalty, and sacrifice. The rest of you earned nothing but shame. He looked around at his family one last time. I gave you everything in life. All I wanted in return was genuine love. Only one of you gave me that. Now you'll all have to live with the choices you made. With that, Richard took Lily's hand and walked out of the room, leaving his family to face the consequences of their betrayal. Let me tell you how this story ends, because endings matter. They show us what really counts in life. The next morning, Patricia packed her designer suitcases and left the mansion without saying goodbye to anyone. No one knew where she went, and honestly, nobody reached out to find out. The woman who had been the lady of the house for 4 decades left in a taxi, alone, with nothing but her clothes and jewelry. Thomas and James both tried, in the days that followed, to apologize to their father. They sent messages, showed up at the house, even tried to go through Lily. But Richard's decision was final. He agreed to meet with them once, just once, at a cafe. I'm not cutting you out of my life, Richard told them, sitting across from his sons. You're still my children. But you need to understand that wealth without character is worthless. You need to build your own lives now. Learn what it means to work hard, to appreciate what you have, to think about others before yourselves. Thomas, humbled for the first time in his life, asked quietly, Dad, do you think we can ever earn your respect again? Richard looked at him with sad eyes. That depends on who you become from here. Show me through your actions, not your words. It might take years, but if you change genuinely, then yes, maybe one day. They both nodded. As they left, James turned back. Dad, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Really sorry. Richard nodded but said nothing more. Angela took a different path. She started small, volunteering at community centers, helping at food banks, and stopped posting her lavish lifestyle online. She got a regular job at a marketing firm and lived modestly. Every week, she would visit her father, not asking for anything, just spending time with him. It took 6 months, but slowly, Richard began to soften toward her. You're doing well, Angela, he told her one Sunday afternoon as they sat in the garden. I can see you're trying. I was awful, Dad, Angela said, tears in her eyes. I'm so ashamed of how I acted. I don't even recognize that person anymore. Good, Richard said gently. That means you're growing. Keep going. But the real transformation happened with Lily and the company. When Lily took over as CEO of Thompson Construction, many people doubted her. She was young, she didn't have an MBA from a fancy school, and she'd never worked in the business before. But what she had was something more valuable: integrity, humility, and a genuine desire to do right by people. Her first act as CEO was to call back every single employee that Thomas had fired. Mr. Peterson, the faithful worker who had been with Richard for 28 years, got a personal phone call from Lily. Mr. Peterson, this is Lily Thompson. I'm calling to ask if you would come back to the company. We need you. My father needs you. I need you. Mr. Peterson was quiet for a moment, then he said, voice choked with emotion, Miss Lily, I would be honored. One by one, the experienced team members returned. They brought back the company's reputation, its solid foundation, and its heart. Lily made other changes too. She cut the unnecessary expenses, ended the flashy parties, sold the luxury cars that Thomas had bought, and redirected that money into employee benefits, safety equipment, and community projects. Within 6 months, Thompson Construction's reputation was restored. Within a year, Profits had doubled. Clients who had left came back. New contracts rolled in. The company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Industry magazines started featuring Lily, calling her the heart-driven CEO and the young leader bringing humanity back to business. But Lily never let it go to her head. She still lived modestly, still made time for her father every evening, and treated every employee with respect. One evening, Richard sat in his study with Gregory, going over reports. "Look at these numbers," Gregory said, amazed. "Lily's done in 1 year what most CEOs couldn't do in 5. She's remarkable, Richard." Richard smiled proudly. "She has something her brothers never had. She understands that business isn't just about profit. It's about people." 2 years after the revelation, the family gathered for Thanksgiving. It was different from before, smaller, quieter, but somehow more meaningful. Angela was there with her fiancé, a humble teacher she'd met while volunteering. She was different now, kinder, more thoughtful, more genuine. Thomas and James weren't invited to the mansion, but Richard had lunch with them the day before. They had jobs now, real jobs, working for other companies, learning to appreciate earning their own way. They were slowly rebuilding their relationship with their father. Patricia. Nobody heard from her. She'd moved to another state, and that chapter was closed. As Lily carved the turkey, Richard looked around the table and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. After dinner, Lily and Richard sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Lily said softly. "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you regret it? The test, I mean. Was it worth the pain?" Richard thought for a long moment. "The truth is always worth knowing, even when it hurts. Yes, I lost people I thought I could trust. Yes, it broke my heart to see how some of my children behaved. But you know what I gained?" "What?" "Clarity. I gained absolute clarity about who loves me genuinely. And I gained the joy of watching you flourish. Seeing you lead that company with grace and wisdom, seeing you care for people the way you cared for me, that's worth every moment of pain." Lily rested her head on her father's shoulder. "I just loved you, Dad. That's all I did." "That's everything, Lily. In the end, that's everything." And so, what started as a test of love ended as a lesson for everyone involved. Richard learned who his true family was. Thomas and James learned humility. Angela learned redemption. Patricia learned that betrayal has consequences. But most importantly, Lily learned that goodness, loyalty, and genuine love will always be rewarded, maybe not immediately, but eventually, in ways that matter most. Sometimes, life tests us not to make us fail, but to show us what we're really made of. And in this case, one daughter's faithful love proved more valuable than all the wealth in the world. The mansion still stands in Chicago. The company still thrives. But now, it's built on a foundation of integrity, not just inheritance. And Richard Thompson. He lived many more happy years, surrounded not by people who wanted his money, but by the few who truly loved him. That's the way it should be. That's the way love wins. So what did we learn from Richard's story? That true love can't be bought, and loyalty reveals itself when times get tough. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. And if you believe more people need to hear this message about family, love, and loyalty, share this video with someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. Thank you for watching, and remember, cherish those who love you for who you are, not what you have. Until next time, take care.